All right, everybody, welcome back to another tutorial. And in this one, we are going to be adding onto our collection of amazing apps we have right now. Of course, this beautiful chat app, as we saw, this amazing university app that has one bit of text, beautiful. And the next thing we're going to be working on is a speed test app. And you can probably guess just by the name exactly what this is going to do. But just to review the logic real quick, what we'll have is something where we can select what network that we want to use. And by network, I just mean server right now. So if I use those terms interchangeably, they mean the same thing. But basically selecting what server we want to use, and then what device we want to communicate with. And then after we select those, there's just going to be a button on it where we're going to send a request to this device. And then we're going to wait for the response. And then we're just going to see how long it took and log it out. So not the fanciest app, but it can showcase a lot of the features that I want to showcase. So there you go. And before we get started writing any code, I did want to kind of go over the UI real quick. So kind of like we have right here. So we have for both accounts, actually, for these accounts and the network, we have a logo on the left. And then we have like the display name for either the network or the account. And then kind of the full name down here. And for accounts, you can just call it any account that you want. And then the full identifier for an account is the account number. But either way, we're going to be using the same layout for basically selecting which one we want to use. So let me just kind of put this together real quick. All right, so for the top section is where we're going to make our selections. We'll say that this can be that logo. And then for the text, what can we have? Actually, this will be left aligned. And we'll say, actually, we'll just call it top text. All right, that's probably good right there. So one of these is going to be the network, and one of them is going to be the account. All right, so we'll have two of these on top, and then whenever we select it, the info is going to show up. But to select it, let me just get a little pencil icon. Okay, so I don't know if we'll use a pencil icon for like the selector, but it'll be something like this, where one of these, like I said, is going to be for the network, and one of them is going to be for the account. And then you just click a little pencil to select it. And then when you do, we'll have a modal pop up with the list of all the either networks or accounts. Then you can select it right there. And then another thing that I actually wanted to make under this, a little UI element, is, let's do this. Just a connection status. So the connection status is going to be pretty simple. It's just going to have a little indicator light or UI element. And then it's just going to give the status to say you're connected or not connected. So something like this. All right. So again, the basics of it, whenever you open the app, you're first going to select the network, and then you're going to select an account. And then this is going to display showing you if you're connected or not. And let me actually move this over, get it centered in the screen a bit. All right. So once we have those, then we have our connection set. We can then have a big button in the center. How do we select this one? Shapes is what I'm looking for. And I think I saw in a couple of different apps. Don't mind that those cops outside. All right. So we'll have some kind of button that says like go or start test or something like this. But anyways, let me zoom out a bit now. Anyways, we'll have a button that says go, and this is going to start the test. And then once we have that test pending, or in other words, the request being sent, we'll have a little timer underneath, and it'll be like 1.2345 seconds, something like this. We'll fine tune it later on. I just kind of want to show you what we're going for before I just start writing a bunch of code. So, okay, let's actually do this. So I'll say, for the device, we'll add some dummy text right here. So we'll say I want to connect to my iMac, and the account number is ABCDF, yada yada, whatever. And for the network, we'll say we'll use, actually, pretend we're using that VTX network And this is the like a shorthand display name that we gave it, and the full identifier is vitaxia.com. So it's going to look something like this. Hit go, it kicks off. And then under here, actually, this is kind of like the MVP. This is what we really need to make something that we can call a speed test. However, for our MVP, and I don't really like to add a bunch of clutter, like non-MVP things to an MVP, but there is one other thing that I want to add in this tutorial. And the reason for that is because I want to show how we can store data long-term. So by that, I mean, whenever we close down the app and open it again, for example, we just open this again, or I think I showed this in the last tutorial, but basically whenever we close down the app and open it again, we don't start from a blank slate every time. We can keep those like historical chat messages or previous test data, so on and so forth. So that's what I want to do here. And for this, we'll just have a little history section on the bottom. And we'll just left align this. And again, all this is going to be is a table with our previous runs. So we'll have something like, actually what data would be there? Like on the VTX network, you connected with, what was this device name? iMac, and we'll say the date is, we'll use this date. So 11/12/22, and something like 1.2345 seconds, whatever that. Okay. So something like this we're going for. Now let me just scroll out. If I can find where I just put that. Okay, so this is the app that we're going for. It's kind of small right now, but there you go. Now, let me just make sure I got all the elements, and yeah, looks good. So hopefully whenever we develop this, it's gonna look a little bit more pretty than this, but we'll use this as a template whenever we structure all of our components. And with that being said, I think we're ready to start hopping into the code. So I already have this ticket written up, and the way that I name my branches is actually based on these tickets. So I start with the ticket or issue number, and then I just have some text. So this is speed test ticket number 71. So when I create my branch, actually can stop this app for now. All right, so I'm gonna create a new branch, and I'm gonna call it 71 speed test. Create that, and okay. Now, how the heck do we create an app on TNB OS? So whenever we create an app, what we want to do is we want to hop over into this apps folder. These are all the system folders. We're going to be talking about, you know, the internals of this later on, but for right now, we'll just stick to app development. So when you expand this, you can see all the existing apps right here. So this one right here, the chat and the university, these are the two apps that actually, I don't know, like look like apps on the thing. There's also that account manager and network manager, which are like system apps, which just want to tell you that like all of these things are called apps, not just the ones on the left-hand side. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new directory, and we'll just call it speed test. All right. Now inside this directory, we can kind of take a hint from university. This is the basic structure of an app. It's going to have a directory called assets, a directory called containers, and a file called registration. Now, assets are for, as you can guess, like the assets. In this case, the one thing that you always have in here is the app icon. Now, containers, you can probably guess this too. This is where all of your containers and kind of like your React code is going to go. And lastly, we have registration right here. And this just contains some data. So basically letting TNB OS know that, hey, this app is ready. You can now register it. In other words, like hook it into the system or make it appear on the bottom taskbar. So let's just go ahead and create that structure right now. So assets, and then one called containers. And then we'll go ahead and make that TypeScript file. Registration. Beautiful. All right, so once we have our basic structure set, the very first thing I'm going to do after this is inside containers, I'm going to make, let's do this. So I'm going to make a file called index.tsx, and this is going to be basically the main window. Now, for this, we just can't start writing like divs and styling this. However, we do need to wrap this app in one component called app window. And I'll show you in a second what this app window component is. It's basically just a wrapper where you're going to pass it two props, I believe, class name and display. And it just includes all the logic. So when you click the app icon, then it displays the app. When you click it again, it hides the app. And it's pretty much just have it so it's already plugged in. You don't have to write that logic by hand. The goal of kind of this platform is to make it as easy as possible for any other developers to create their own apps. So this is just one of the things I abstracted out. But anyways, this component can be found in System, Components, App Window. And I'll just go ahead and import everything right now. So app props. And I'll talk to you when we use these in just a second, what everything is. But for right now, I just want to kind of take care of my imports. And also, I did make these kind of cool little helper templates. For every, or I want to say for most components that we write, they are going to come with a styles file. And this is just so that we can use styled components. If you're not familiar with styled components, fear not, because we're going to be going over that as well. For right now, I just want to get the basic structure, like I said. But either way, for these styles, which essentially is just like a bunch of CSS, but we can do some cool stuff with it, we want to import it into our component file. So I'm just going to import everything from that file. So import it as S from my styles file, and good to go. So those are the only imports that we need. Now we can just go ahead and start creating our component, which is going to be a functional component. So I'm going to say const, and I just named this one the same name as the application. So I'm going to create a function, or excuse me, a functional called component called speed test, and the type of this is going to be this SFC. So before we go any deeper, let's just go ahead and look at what this SFC type is. All this SFC, little tongue twister there is basically a React functional component, but we pass a couple different things into it. One is this class name optional attribute right here. And this class name attribute, we're going to be getting more into it later on, but just know that since we're using styled components, a lot of them are going to require this specific property name called class name. And then in addition to that, we also have this right here. And for those who are not familiar with this record keyword in TypeScript, this is just saying that we're gonna also be passing an object whose keys are of type string and whose values are of type unknown. And the reason that we do this is because we're also going to be passing in like any other custom props to our component. So, okay, so we have basically a spiced up functional component. Now inside here, we are going to be passing in these app props. So let me go ahead and take a look at this interface right here. So all this interface is it's saying that we're going to be passing in a display prop, and this is actually the prop that we're going to pass into our component to say, are you the component that's supposed to be displaying on the screen right now? Now we have this because, you know, this operating system, air quotes, it isn't quite as fancy as other operating systems right now. So we can only display one app at a time. Hopefully that'll change in the future. But for right now, everything is hooked up where if you select that app by clicking the app icon, this display property is going to be set to true, and then your app's just going to be displayed. All right, so easy peasy. And now for this, let me go ahead and destructure those. So again, class name and display are those props that we want to pass in. And for this, we can actually, let's write it like this. Okay, so we can go ahead and return one thing now. Again, as the topmost parent component, that's going to be our app window right here. And for display, we are just going to be passing in display. And this is going to take this class name as well. And yeah, so this is pretty much the basic structure for all of the apps that you create. Our content, what you think of is the app, the UI, all that's going to be going nested inside is a child. But this app window component is basically just taking care of the logic for you. And yeah, basically it. So once we have that, actually, let me go ahead and export this right now. So export default speed test. And all right. And now after this, we'll go ahead and, all right. So this is the basic structure, everything we need. However, instead of this div right here, we actually want to convert this to a styled component, and we're going to call that styled component container. So I probably should have went through this line by line, but either way, whenever we use styled components, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import this keyword styled right here. And then since we are going to be essentially creating a div component, what we're going to do is we're going to create a constant. I keep it named uppercase, and then you set it equal to style dot basically the HTML tag, and in this case it's div. Now inside these ticks right here is where you can basically write all of your CSS. So for example, I'm going to write background, and we'll change this later on, but just to get something on the screen, we'll just say that we're creating a div and it has a white background. That's it. And I'm going to copy this container name, because what we can do now, since we imported everything as S, we're going to replace this div tag with S dot container. All right, and make sure we get that S dot container. So what this is doing, again, just to hammer in, for anyone who's not familiar with styled components, whenever we render this, it's going to look and see, hey, what is S dot container? And it's going to say, oh, it's a div with a white background. So it's going to convert this to a div with a white background, and then we're going to have the text hey in there. And just to style this a little bit more, so I want to display this as flex, because what we will do is, yeah, I don't even know if we need, well, actually we can keep it right now, since what I want to do is kind of pretty much just recreate that university app where we just have a box and text in the center for the time being. But this is all subject to change. I just want to kind of get everything up and running for this. So align items center, and also justify content center. This is just going to make sure our text appears in the center of the screen. Now I also want to put a little border radius on this of 8 pixels, just because having the app with square edges or square corners, it looks a bit weird. And I also want to have a little box shadow, but I'm too lazy to type it, so I'm just going to copy it from the university app. All right, a little slight box shadow right here. And then I'm going to give it a height and a weight, or excuse me, height, we'll just say 60%. Again, we're going to have to adjust the height and width as well when we start actually putting those components in there. But all right, so line items, background, border radius, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so this is good. So pretty much just a white rectangle with text appearing in the middle. A lot of work to do, but it'll do for now. So now that our basic container is looking good, our basic app as we have it right now, the next thing I want to do is just find an icon. And I have this site that I use quite often, just flaticon.com, pretty cool site. And let me just type speed and pretty much just pick the first one. This one looks all right. All right, and for this, what we can do is just save image as, and I'm gonna call it app icon. This is already a ping, so that's good. That's the format that we want. And yeah, just a shout out to Free Pick. Thank you for the icon, and also another shout out to Flat Icon. I really do like this site, so yeah, give credit where credit is due. So assets, and let me pop open my downloads, and I'm just gonna drag this app icon ping into assets. WebStorm always does that. I don't know why, but you gotta do it twice. Okay, so I now move that file into assets, There you go, looking good. And the last, or one of the last things that we have to do is we need to fill out our registration file. Now to see what we need for this, I'm also gonna use this university registration as a template, just to make sure I don't have any typos or anything. And all right, so I'm gonna replace everywhere it says university with speed test. And I'm missing one, but we'll get to that in a second. So the first piece of information that we need to give it is this app icon. So again, this is just a reference to this file right here. So app, speed test, assets, app icon. And the next thing that we're gonna be needing to give it is the location of our root app component. And that's just the component that we just created. It's actually our only component right now. And then after this, we're going to be importing a couple types, and that is app icon type. Now, basically any app that you create, I'm guessing that it's going to be an image. There's also this path that we're using for system components, since we're using icons for those. But really, this is like 99% of the time, unless you really want to use an icon, it's just going to be an image or a ping file. And then this registration right here, it's basically just all of these keys and values. We'll take a look at this real quick. This is just saying that this registration is going to require an app ID. And this app ID right here, this is just used for, I don't know, some of the internal Redux portion of it. Basically, whenever you click the app icon on the bottom, it's going to set this app is the active app, or in other words, inform TNBOS that this is the one that's going to appear. So it just needs a unique name. And I just do the camel case of whatever the app name is. But yeah, just make sure that, you know, it's just a unique name. And for the icon, of course, we'll just say app icon. It's an image or a ping file. And a system app, this is always going to be false for you. It was just true for like one of these apps, like the account manager and the network manager. But for any of the apps that we create, this is always going to be false. And there you go. Now from here, we're just going to export this speed test, which is that component that we just created. And I'll show you why in just a second. And also this registration that we just filled out. So once we have this registration filled out, all we need to do is basically just register it or hook it into the main system. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So inside this apps directory right here, there's this TSX file called the registry. And this is pretty much just the final process where we pretty much let TNBOS know that a registration is complete and to render the app when needed. So let me go ahead and do this. So we'll import basically these two things, speed test component and its registration from apps, speed test, registration. And then after this, in app registrations, we just need to go ahead and include that. And what's going to happen on boot is it's going to go through all of these, check all the registrations, and from here it knows, you know, how to hook this up in Redux, its identifier, what icon to use, so on and so forth. But all this is taken care of in the background. The only other thing that we need to do, one more line of code before this bad boy is up and running, is in here we need to actually render the app out. So I was going to copy it, but I'm not that lazy. Okay, so under chat, what we can do is we can just render the app. And for display right here, what we're saying is we want to display this app whenever the active app, and this is going to be the value that's stored in Redux, whenever it matches this app ID. Because remember I said whenever we click that icon, the active app in Redux is going to be set to this ID. So whenever that's the case, we just want to say display this app on the screen. So we say active app whenever it's equal to the speed test registration.app ID. In other words, whenever it's equal to speed test, then this will be equal to true. And therefore it'll basically say display this app. Easy peasy. So if everything works correctly, then I believe that now we can go ahead and start this bad boy and check it out. Hopefully this works. Come on, no whammy, no whammy. All right, let me minimize this thing. So check it out. So we have our chat app as before and our university app, but now, wait for it, boom, look at that. It says, hey, right now, but I'll show you that we have hot reloading working as well. Speed test, and again, since we have all that set up, we don't need to refresh or anything, and there you go. So 3 beautiful apps. The beginning of what will soon be the most popular operating system in the world. All right, well, at least in my apartment, maybe, but hey, I can dream, right? All right, and that is the basics of how we create an app in TNBOS. And well, even though we got an app, we still have a lot of work to do before we actually can click a button and kick off all this stuff to actually communicate with other devices. But I think that's probably good for this tutorial. So as always, thank you all for watching, and in the next one, we'll get started on the UI. So see you then.